True cases.
Division of Public Police engages in a pattern and practice of using excessive force.
Real victims.
No, he's not all right. They were pounding him in the head.
Examined by two experienced investigators.
Police car shouldn't say to protect and serve, or they should be adding themselves in the bottom. It should say to protect and serve ourselves.
The missed clues.
Austin School Police acknowledging today that they should have done more to investigate.
The cover-ups.
It was a cover-up, and I think that people were looking out for their own skin.
From the extensive work by Salvatore Restorelli and Ira Robbins comes the Archangels of Justice case files. I am your host, Joe Rost, and I will be your guide on this quest to find the answers and give a voice to the victims of these tragic cases. Hello to our listeners, and thank you again for joining us wherever you are for the Archangels of Justice case files. This is the fourth episode in a multi-part series looking into the Sheena Morris case. If this is your first time listening, I recommend you start at episode 1 and work from there. If you're someone that likes to listen to things out of order, then feel free to keep on listening. But first, a message from our sponsors. Do you want to launch your own podcast or host your own media? Then you should be looking at blueberry.com. That's BLUBRRY.com. With no third-party sites to log into, you remain in control by never leaving your website and having an iTunes and SoundCloud-friendly RSS feed. Get your 30-day free trial by just typing AoJ Podcast when you check out, and you could be broadcasting your very own media today. Did you know that approximately 95% of purchase decisions are made on the first pages of search engines? TotalFrontPage.com knows this, and they can do what no other digital marketing company does. Put your company name in the autocomplete box of Google and Bing, so that searchers see your business before they see any other company. Your business will appear in most, if not all, organic listings. No competitors, just you. If you'd like to know more about this groundbreaking service, you can check out their website, TotalFrontPage.com. Or for a free consultation, mention AoJ Podcast in the subject line when you email info@TotalFrontPage.com. Act today, because once these search terms are purchased, they cannot be used by any other company. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting this podcast. Before we get started, I want to talk about the format of this episode. It will be about the lead up and through the Dr. Phil show, but this episode will be a little different as it will include clips from Dr. Phil's YouTube channel. Our many attempts to contact the producers have gone unanswered, and I'm unable to use all the footage from the show. If you would like to watch the entire episode, you can see it on the Dr. Phil show's website. I will try to be as clear as possible when I play a clip from the show versus an interview with the family. I am joined today by Kelly, Sheena's mother, Dave, Sheena's father, Lee Williams of the Herald Tribune, and of course, our two Archangels, Sal and Ira. Without further ado, I give you episode 4 of the Sheena Morris case, the Dr. Phil Show. It has been over 2 years since Sheena's death, and there has been no response from the Bradenton Beach Police or the state of Florida, despite Kelly's many efforts. So Sheena's family decided the only way they would get any kind of reinvestigation into her case is to create public awareness. Kelly taught herself how to build a website and did so for Sheena, in the hope someone would come across it and help them. It is still up today at justiceforsheena.com. Dave and Kelly spent years posting to the website and writing to different national TV shows, hoping someone would look at their daughter's case and give it the attention it deserves. To their dismay, they didn't get the help they begged for. During the years, Kelly continued her own investigation and did the job Detective Diaz should have done by calling and interviewing people who knew Genoese, such as his former business partners, other girls he dated, and even did a background check on him. Kelly could not understand why this man was never officially questioned by the police, so she begged the mayor of Bradenton Beach to meet with her and look at all the evidence. Finally, after a year, the mayor gave in and held a 2-day meeting with Sheena's family. Kelly explained to the mayor that she was not working and her husband, Oz, was laid off soon after Sheena's death. Her life had become this case, and the only way she could afford to have Sheena's body exhumed and the attorney cost was to hold fundraisers. Kelly explained that these fundraisers were a huge undertaking for the family, and so many of Sheena's friends had to help organize them. Kelly, Dave, Sheena's family, and friends were grief-stricken, exhausted, and bewildered as to why these investigations weren't done by Detective Diaz or the Bradenton Beach Police. Kelly even told the mayor that once they raised the money, they found a forensic pathologist and then learned the procedures to have her body exhumed. All these things they had to learn as parents, and there was no handbook for this. Kelly talks about this meeting.
It took a while to get this meeting. We had all of our files, everything that we had learned, and it was basically a 2-day plea of going through everything that we wanted answers for, hoping that the mayor would instruct the chief of police and Detective Diaz to reopen this case. And again, it was just another refusal from Chief Speciale and Leonard Diaz.
Their pleas to force the Bradenton Beach police to reopen the case were ignored, and Sheena's family was sent on their way. Sheena's family continually updated the website. They would not let Sheena be ignored, and would write letters to Florida Governor Rick Scott, State Attorney Pam Bondi, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, only to continually receive denial letters. Kelly would not let this keep her down, and was determined to not let this happen to anyone else's child. So she joined the Q Center for Missing Persons, a volunteer search and rescue team based out of North Carolina. During her involvement with the search and recovery team, she met many people who experienced similar situations with their loved ones. Kelly was introduced to several experts who helped the family review Sheena's case and explain all the inconsistencies in Detective Diaz's investigation, but also all the things he didn't do when determining Sheena's death. In July of 2011, Kelly's husband found a job, but it required them to move to Seattle. This was very hard for Kelly, because she felt that once she was there, everything just stopped. There was no way to continue the fight for justice. Kelly and Dave would still get online and continue to post to Sheena's website whenever they could, but then finally, after nearly a year in Seattle, she gets a call from a gentleman who introduced himself as Lee Williams, an investigative reporter with the Herald Tribune. He explained to Kelly that someone contacted him, saying that he needed to look into Sheena's case. I talked to Lee about what got him so involved in this case.
Boy, I suppose sometime around 2012, May, June, I met Kelly and spoke to her. I was immediately struck by her. I've met a lot of people in my job who have lost loved ones and think there was something nefarious about their loss, but Kelly was completely different. She was organized. She was very insightful. She was very open. She wasn't holding anything back. She was a lot different than a lot of other folks that have come to me and asked me to investigate a death.
Lee worked over many months to gather information. He did a lot of homework before even contacting Kelly. Lee agrees with Kelly and tells her that she needs to continue the fight for Sheena. Lee also goes on to tell Kelly that he would like to meet with her and look at the evidence she had. After this conversation, Kelly continues to think about her daughter's case. Kelly's husband and Sheena's stepfather, Oz, cannot let it go either, and tells Kelly that she needs to go back to Tampa, Florida to figure out how to get this case reopened. When they agree to continue the fight for Sheena, Kelly goes into overdrive and begins to plan a march for Sheena. Kelly and her husband agree to live separately to try to make something happen in this case. Kelly scraped together every dime she had and made the move back to Tampa from across the country. She didn't think she could do it, but members of her search and recovery team flew to Seattle to drive the moving truck and her SUV back. Kelly and Sheena's father, Dave, planned to organize a march for justice from New York to Florida. They made flyers and enlisted the public to help with the march. Leading up to the two marches held at the same day and time, in New York and Florida, Kelly sent press releases to the media. When Kelly got back to Tampa, she meets with Lee to go through all the case files. Kelly takes Lee through the crime photos, showing him how and why this didn't make sense as a suicide. It was extremely hard for Kelly to look at these photos after all these years, but knew it had to be done. Lee was very angry with what he saw.
They are a joke, quite frankly, in my opinion. Their so-called Detective Diaz, is incompetent. This was his first unaccompanied suspicious death investigation, his first one ever. They're poorly trained, they're poorly led, and they've got a terrible attitude. They should have been the ones lobbying for all these outside investigations. My God, man, if you've ruled something a suicide and it turns out that it could be a homicide, there should be no one leading the charge for. No one should have led the charge for outside investigations louder than the chief and the detective. Instead, they fought it and fought it and fought it. All he had to do was invite FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, in. That's the only thing the chief had to do, was just say, hey, come on in and take a second look. Or Manatee County Sheriff's Office. Manatee County Sheriff's Office is a professional law enforcement agency. They have incredible detectives, crime scene, forensics are all top notch. Neither one of those were invited in. It's like they were afraid, in my humble opinion, of what these outside investigators, these professional investigators, would have found.
Lee's first article was released on the same day as the march, and it was front page of the Sarasota Herald Tribune, which you can still read today on the Herald Tribune's website. Kelly wasn't sure if she was going to get any other media coverage for this event, but she didn't care. As the march begins, there is not much media, but suddenly as she looks up, she sees multiple media and news stations come and cover the march. They were carrying signs such as FDLE, frequently delayed law enforcement, Diaz, give up your badge, and many other phrases. You can see these photos on both archangelsofjustice.org and justiceforsheena.com. Kelly talks about this march.
Several years later, that after I moved back from Seattle, that we organized and held the Justice for Sheena March, and that's where all the signs were: FDLE, frequently delayed law enforcement. Sometimes there's justice, sometimes there's just us. Some of the signs would read, Diaz, turn in your badge. And this was really the first time that everything really got out there, because at the same time of this march in New York and the march in Florida, Lee's article was hitting the front page of all the work that he had done. And this is when all the media showed up, and they were covering the marches for justice in the media.
Had Lee not taken an interest and so thoroughly covered Sheena's case, nothing would have ever happened. It was Lee Williams' investigative reporting that took this case to a national level. His series of articles leads to Kelly receiving multiple calls from different shows, including Dateline, 2020, The Dr. Phil Show, and many others. But after nearly 3 years of painstaking investigation into Sheena's case, Kelly and Dave are very apprehensive of anybody looking into their daughter's case and not giving it the right coverage. They just wanted someone to look at the evidence and give their daughter a fair investigation. Kelly talks about this time.
There was after the march and a lot of the media, the Dr. Phil Show had called. They left a message, and I didn't respond to the Dr. Phil Show. I was just hesitant about it, and I didn't know if if their attempt was to, bring us on to discuss suicides. So I didn't respond to that one. There was another show, Dateline, who had contacted me. There was, I think it was Discovery ID, and they had wanted that show. They wanted me to basically sign that I wouldn't do a show with anyone else. And I said I wasn't going to do that. We worked for 4 years to make our voices heard on Sheena's case. I wasn't giving it to just one show. This was our daughter. This wasn't about a show. This was our daughter's case that needed to be heard. And I also said to them that if you were to record a show, are you going to guarantee that it airs? And they said, no, we don't do that. And the reason I had asked that question was because there was a story of another woman, and the family had gone through all this recording, which it's a lot for a family to do. And they went through all the filming, all the recording, all for nothing, because they never even aired the segment. And so I didn't want that to happen to us. It was again later on, more articles were coming out about Sheena's case, and then the Dr. Phil show again did contact us, and um, we had then finally agreed to go ahead and let them share Sheena's story. Um, they had reassured us that this was not um, about or focusing on suicide. This was about uncovering Sheena's case.
The Dr. Phil producers finally got Kelly and Dave to agree to be on the show. And once it happened, it was a whirlwind.
Everything started happening, it seemed, so quickly. Before I knew it, they had Dave flown to Florida, and there we were in our home filming, and we're hours into filming. And I remembered that they had this paper that they had wanted us to sign. And there were things in it. I can't remember what the paper's called, but it scared the daylights out of me. Because I just didn't know what they were going to be able to do with the footage and things. I just didn't know how things were going to turn out, and so I started to get cold feet. And there we were, Dave and I, and all of a sudden, Dave and I went out to our lanai, and I said something to the effect that I don't think we should do this, and that I was nervous. And so right then, all the camera crew, they start packing up all their equipment, and they took everything outside into the front of the house. And then we get a call from the producer, and she's trying to calm my nerves and try to get me to move forward again, trying to explain that nothing bad is going to happen here, and reassure me that this is not some sort of Jerry Springer show. And Dave and I were out there discussing it, trying to figure out what to do and do we go forward. And then I think we both just ended up agreeing that if we do this, if we call this off, then we're probably going to be blackballed from any other media, and that we're going to have to take our chances and just trust that the producers were true to their word. And that was just being, telling the things that were truthful. And so then we went ahead and proceeded, and I think it was just like everything happened in 3 days, and we were working on very little sleep because for days, Dave and I were having to go through our files and dig up this and dig up that. It could be 3:00 in the morning, and we would get a phone call that they need this paper, and you'd have to get up and you get them the report and the things that they request. So they were all very, very thorough in how they were doing this. It's just very exhausting.
After a couple days of filming, Kelly and Dave are flown to Los Angeles. They are exhausted from the flight and just want to get to their hotel room for some much needed rest. Once they land, Kelly is contacted by one of the producers of the Dr. Phil show and told that they need to interview her immediately to ask her one question. Kelly was shocked by the question. Genovese was telling the Dr. Phil show producers that Sheena was aggressive with him. This supposed interaction comes up in later investigations, so listen as Kelly talks about this experience.
Dave had gotten a call that the Dr. Phil show wanted me to come to the studio, and it was really late. It had been a long day of flying, not much sleep, and I was just hoping that, could just go to our hotel rooms and get some sleep. And they told Dave that they needed me ready and makeup and hair and everything done. And it was late in the evening because they had one question that they wanted to ask me. And I couldn't figure it out. And I was really so tired that I really didn't want to have to do this, but for some reason they found it very important. And that question was, had I ever seen Sheena and Genoese in an altercation, like a fist fight or something? And I said no, and that's basically I had never seen them physical with each other. But that's the very first thing that we heard as we were coming out onto the stage was that Genoese had claimed that even I had to take Sheena off of him at one point. Well, that never happened. I had never seen the two of them physical. But he's on national television stating this. They talked about that in the FDLE reports. So it seems to me that whatever Genoese says is golden. That never happened. I have never seen that, period.
After Lee's series of articles, and days before they are scheduled to appear on the Dr. Phil show, the FBI makes a public announcement and said if the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or the Bradenton Beach Police invites them, that they would take over the investigation of Sheena's case. Federal law states that a federal agency cannot step into a state case unless that investigative body asks for support. Miraculously, 2 days later, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement changes their tune and can no longer ignore Sheena's family, as they did for 3 long years. They quietly reopen the case, despite Bradenton Beach Police Chief Speciale insistence that the case is still closed.
They reopened the case when Lee Williams started putting everything out there into the media, and then found out that this SMART panel had convened, and due to Lee's writing and covering this, then the SMART panel recommended that all these 20-something discrepancies in their investigation was to be corrected. And Chief Sam Speciale kept denying to the public that this was an open case, yet the FDLE was saying this is an open investigation. And Chief Sam Speciale still refused to believe that that was an open investigation.
Kelly and Dave arrive at the show. They are kept in separate dressing rooms so they do not see Genoese. Kelly and Dave talk about this experience.
We were separated.
We separated
Go ahead.
us. Well, they had actually separated us. Even we were in a different hotel. That there's a certain hotel Dr. Phil puts guests up in as they appear on the show there. But they had put us in one hotel. Genoese was in a separate hotel. But even prior to the show, dressing rooms, all that stuff, he was in a completely different part of the building than we were in, and we didn't actually see him until we were all on the stage together.
Quickly, Kelly and Dave are escorted to the stage and see Genoese.
A little stressful, of course, to be sitting there 3 feet away from him, face to face, but I think it was time. We needed to sit down and face each other, and it was very nerve-wracking, I think. But I think that I really needed to be that close to him and to see him, because what I couldn't figure out all this time that had passed, why never once did he ever send Sheena any flowers to her gravesite or revisit her, and not on any, anniversary, or do anything for her. Or most of all, why wouldn't he help us? Why didn't he come to Dave or I and plead and say, Kelly, Dave, I did not do this. I didn't do it. Whatever it is I can help you with, please let me help you, because I did not do this. We never got that all those years. I would expect
why wouldn't he show up at the door and get down on his hands and knees and tell me you didn't do this? Explain it to me. But he doesn't do that.
Finally, Kelly will get the chance to confront Genoese about everything he had done before and after her daughter's death. This is what Kelly said on the Dr. Phil show.
If he had nothing to do with this and all the pattern of conduct, you know, I'd have to say I'm truly sorry, but based upon a pattern of conduct and my investigation, I have to look at everything. I have to look at every piece of evidence.
Also from the show, Dave says his piece.
I feel the same way as Kelly does. And, you know, like she says, the very first thing that we have to relate back to is Joe was the last person to see Sheena alive. And that's where we would like to start, and the pattern of conduct just doesn't fit. We have to start somewhere, and that's where we would like to start.
Genoese then responds to the grieving parents with this.
Did you have a volatile relationship with her?
We had a relationship, Dr. Phil, and in the relationship there were good times, bad times. It was a relationship. We had our fights. And Kelly had more fights than Sheena than I ever would think. Kelly wasn't even, at the time, Sheena wasn't even speaking with Kelly, didn't want her to come to our wedding. None of that had ever come about, and that's the truth. I wasn't the last person to see Sheena alive. The two police officers that showed up for the domestic call were the last two people to see Sheena alive. See, they just said two lies. There was two lies right there.
And what were the two lies?
Well, he said I was the last person to see Sheena alive. It's not true. The two officers that showed up after I left were the last two people, I think, to see Sheena alive.
She had me helping her with the centerpieces.
Okay. What are we talking about?
Well, you just said that Sheena didn't even want me at
Kelly,
the wedding.
You text messaged me and Sheena got mad, okay? When I asked you to go check...
Because a fax from your company was sent to my house, and I still don't understand that either.
It doesn't matter. The point of the matter is when I asked you to go check if Sheena was home, when me and you talked, and you said, well, I don't even know if she'll answer the phone.
You didn't ask me to go check on her. You did not ask me to go check on her. I went and checked on her to knock on the door. Yes, Sheena and I were in an argument those 2 days because you were telling me about their argument. That's why she was mad at me, and I don't blame her.
David just specified that I was the last one to see Sheena alive.
Well, if you killed her, you were.
Okay. No, what he's saying is that I was the last person to see Sheena alive.
Okay.
And the point of the matter is, once I left, there was two police officers that showed up and interviewed Sheena.
I asked Kelly about these two lies that were supposedly told about Genoese.
Oh, well, the fact is that I was helping Sheena. She was having me, she wanted me to do the invitations, to make them. And she was sharing with me the different types of centerpieces that she was interested in. And so he keeps claiming that I wasn't even going to be invited to the wedding. It was just the 2 days before Sheena's death. You know, yes, we were in an argument, but we were in an argument because of Genoese, because he kept calling me to try to tell me his side of the reason why they were arguing. And it really wasn't necessary. Sheena didn't like it, and I don't blame her. I don't blame her for being mad. It wasn't my business, but yet he kept involving me. And I think he was almost doing it on purpose so that she would stay mad at me. And I really think that he absolutely hated when she was around me. I remember a Friday evening, Sheena comes over and Genoese has his kids and she's hanging out with us as usual. And I see Sheena making this face while she's texting. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she explains to me that Genoese is all mad because she's over at our house. And I said, well, that's interesting. So here you are at your mother's and your stepfather's house, and he doesn't like it, but you're not out with your girlfriends. You're 22 years old. You could be out with your girlfriends and having a good time and go to a club somewhere. But no, you're at our house, and he doesn't like it.
Dr. Phil talks to Genoese about the text message exchange between him and Sheena on New Year's morning.
So at 1:52, she sends you a text message that says, "I took pictures."
Right.
What was she referring to?
Well, probably about the scratch on her finger and such. And at that point, she probably was wanting to retaliate against me for leaving her there and trying to get me in some kind of domestic trouble.
Here's the picture. Then
Right.
at 1:53, she texts you and says, "You're evil and scary."
Right.
Why would she say that?
Because because she was upset, and Sheena, that's really the way Sheena would talk.
Okay, then 12 minutes later, she calls 911.
Right.
And tells the police she fears that you're going to enter her apartment.
Right, because I told her I was going to her apartment to get my clothes because I was done with the relationship. So I told her I was going to go to her apartment and via text, via phone, that I was going to get my clothes and go home. Because I wanted my clothes out of her apartment. I wanted to end the relationship. I was done.
Well, let's listen to what she said to 911.
911, what's the emergency?
Hi, my name is Sheena. I'm in Manatee County right now. I was on vacation for the holiday with my fiance, and we have two separate homes. He's on the way to my home apparently right now. He took off with my car keys and my house keys, and he said he was going to destroy my house. He left here probably about half an hour ago. I had deputies come out here because he did physically hurt me. And they couldn't.
Together or no?
No, we do not live together. He has his own residence, own mailing address, everything. He does not have permission to enter my home.
Okay, what is his name?
His name is Joe Genoese. I filled out a police report here in Manatee County because he did make me bleed and left claw marks all over me and stuff.
Okay, so she tells them you're going to destroy her apartment. Did you threaten to destroy her apartment in anger?
No, not at all. I went there I wanted to go get my clothes out of her and take my clothes and go home and be done with the relationship.
Now, just from a psychological standpoint, she sounds very rational to me at that point. She's concerned, but she sounds rational. She doesn't sound despondent. She doesn't sound irrational. She doesn't sound like she's losing control. Does she sound that way to you?
No, not at all.
Sound that way to y'all?
Correct.
2:12, she texts Joe warning him to stay away from her apartment, and then 15 minutes later, her last text to you. She says, "I'm stuck here. I have no way home. You can't leave me here." 1 minute later, you respond, "I don't want to be with someone like you. I deserve better." At 2:37, you text, "I'm done, Sheena. I'm not living like this. I'm out of your bubble. You don't have to push me away anymore." 2:43, "Great, Sheena, take pictures. Nothing will get me back. You choose to be a little girl, a hypocrite. You can have your bubble and your threats." 2:55, "You chose to stay. I offered to take you home after you told me you wanted to go, but you chose to stay. I'm done with this. Call me when you're a woman and grow up." 9:33 the next morning, you text and say, "You need to leave the room by 10 a.m. I am not paying for another night."
Dr. Phil brings out one of Sheena's best friends, Kelly Holland, and he tells this story about Genoese.
They got on the phone with each other, started yelling at each other, screaming at each other, wanting to fight each other, and got so crazy that Joe ended up pulling a gun out of the glove box. Ex-boyfriend was not around, but they were trying to find each other and fight that night. I remember Sheena running up into her apartment, and I remember she locked herself in there because I went to knock on it later and it was locked, and she told me that Joe was not coming in here with the gun. So he did come up to the apartment, and I remember locking, I came out, told him that I locked the door behind me, told him you can't come in here with the gun. We talked for a few minutes. Joe eventually put the gun away. I walked down to the car with him, put the gun back in the car, and then we went in the house and kind of talked over the situation. Had Joe kind of realize that he made a bigger deal out of the situation than it really was, and eventually apologized. We went out later that night.
Do you recall that, or you don't?
I don't remember the gun part, to tell you the truth. I don't remember bringing a gun up and pulling a gun out and all that.
You had it like in your belt behind your back. I saw you put it there.
I mean, sometimes I carried it where it was in the glove box. The point of the matter is I had a concealed weapons license, okay? But I don't remember waving the gun around or anything like that.
After that, Sal, the man Genoese was chasing with a gun, even appeared on the show.
Sal says Joe had a threatening demeanor and always acted as if he owned Sheena. That's how he describes you. He's joining us today on Polycom. So Sal, you're there. We're talking here about the fact that there was a night, according to Kelly, that Joe was looking for you while he was wearing a gun and that it could have gotten bad. Did you know you were being looked for that night? And what do you have to say about this?
His whole demeanor, with the conversation we had, pretty much came off as a thug.
Did he call you and tell you to stop talking to his fiance?
Yes, he did.
And if you did not, what did he say would happen?
Pretty much threatening my life that he'll find me and he'll take care of the situation.
Do you recall that exchange?
Yes, I do. The point of the matter is I called him, I asked him very nicely, I said, look, me and Sheena are engaged now, and you really need to stop calling her, because she doesn't want you to call her anymore. And she was like, you need to leave me alone, etc. And he just wasn't listening to her. So I took the phone and I said, look, we're engaged now. And he basically turned around and says, I don't care what you are. So I think any typical man will get a little upset when you ask a man to stop calling his fiance that now you're engaged. And he basically told me to go myself.
Genoese confronts Kelly about all the things she had been saying over the last few years and all the people she had been talking to, including Genoese's ex-wife.
Why would you want to talk to a person that I'm involved with, to ruin my life? Like
No,
you
it's
have
not
been trying to ruin my life for no reason.
I'm not trying to ruin your life.
Kelly, you have no evidence.
I am trying to find out who murdered my daughter.
That's fine, but you don't call me a murderer in the interim. You do it professionally, and you do it intelligently. The point of the matter is on her page, you have Joe the murderer.
I have a disclaimer that we are not calling you the murderer. When she finally talked to me several months later, she called me, and she was explaining to me how she had...
You contacted her first.
I contacted her first, yes.
Thank you.
When I talked with her, as a matter of fact, she said that she had hired a private investigator as well on you. And apparently there were some things that she had of concern as well. In addition to the fact now, my daughter's engagement ring turned out to be, after she was exhumed, we had the jewelry that he had given her taken off. And I took the engagement ring to an appraiser where they explained to me that this engagement ring was nothing more than a mere piece of glass.
What are you talking about? Sheena knew it wasn't real because I couldn't afford it. Does that make me a criminal? She might have told you that she didn't know, but obviously I told her when I gave it to her, okay? And anybody might have even gone and got it appraised. She knew that. I told her because I was honest, okay? So what does that have to do with anything,
On
Kelly?
December 23rd, her and I are driving down the street after Christmas shopping, and we got talking about her ring. Do you think that's real? I don't know, that sort of thing.
Dr. Phil then asked Genoese if he had ever been violent in relationships in the past. Here is how that exchange went down on the show.
You've been in relationships before. Have you been in relationships since?
Of course, yes.
Have you ever had any problems with any other women, any domestic violence charges, anybody accuse you of trying to kill them or hurt them in any way? I mean, you've said that, Kelly said that you brandished a weapon and threatened someone. Have you had any history of this with other women?
Well, Dr. Phil, I got a 20-year history. I was married for 15 years, and then prior to that, I knew my ex-wife for 4 to 5 years and never had a domestic violence in the 20 years that I was married to this woman. So I think that gives you just a little history. Never once. I've never been in trouble with the law. So you tell me about history. I was married or known the girl for 20 years and never had one domestic problem, not one domestic issue. And in 20 years in 15 years that I was married and in 5 years before that I knew her.
Okay. Have you had any problems since then?
Since then when?
Since that marriage.
Actually, after the marriage, I had a problem with my ex-wife because we were going through a nasty divorce. But yeah, we had a domestic instance through divorce when we were separated. And such.
So you did have a domestic violence charge?
After.
But you said, look at my history, 20 years, no problem.
No,
but
Dr.
afterwards
Phil,
you did.
Dr. Phil, in the 20 years that I known my wife, okay, or that I was married, I never had a domestic issue with my wife in those 20 years. It's when we were separated, I had a domestic issue.
The domestic Dr. Phil is talking about was between Genoese and his ex-wife, just a few months after Sheena's death. According to his ex-wife, she was dropping off their daughter's belongings when Genoese came storming out of his house. The 5'4" Genoese was pushing his chest up against his ex-wife and yelling aggressively in her face as soon as she got out of the car. As she walked to give their daughter her things, he got even more aggressive and called her names like slut, greedy bitch, and welfare bitch, all in front of their children. As she walked up the stairs, Genoese shoved her out of the way. His ex-wife defended herself and smacked him on the back. This infuriated Genoese, and he quickly turned around and shoved the mother of his children down the open outside stairwell. His ex-wife was scratched up and bleeding. She was forced to call the police out of fear of her safety. Police immediately respond and arrest Genoese for domestic violence. The deposition from the court proceedings between Genoese and his ex-wife is available on archangelsofjustice.org. Kelly and Dave told the Bradenton Beach Police and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement about this incident, but of course they were told it was not important. Dr. Phil then talks about the Bradenton Beach Police not knowing about Sheena's 911 call, and Genoese's son past records on New Year's morning 2009.
The police say that she didn't call 911 that night. We heard it. She obviously did.
They had her cell phone, and I had her cell phone records. And when I looked at the cell phone records and I saw that she had...
But they have access to 911. They don't need your cell phone. That's their system.
They would not look further into it. All they kept telling me was, she did not make a 911 phone call, so I went and found the 911 phone call myself.
Did you use the toll pass to come and go on that toll bridge to the island?
I had an E-pass, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Did I use it on the way back?
Yeah.
I don't believe so because I was texting and such, and I think I pulled into a lane, and I think I actually paid instead of going through the E-pass or something.
So you had an E-pass, but you say you chose to pay cash?
I don't remember because I think that there was. I gave all my toll I gave them all my toll passes, in other words, all my toll records, all my phone records, etc. I went, I interviewed with detectives, and I gave them everything they asked me for, and I told them the absolute truth.
Okay. And you said that when y'all checked in, you got one key to the hotel room.
No, I don't believe we did get one key. I thought I could have swore we had two keys.
Dr. Phil then confronts Genoese about there being 2 hotel keys.
Did you say that he said they got one key?
No,
The detective that evening had called Joe several times and asked if they could get his key to the room back, and he said he never had a key to the room.
Is that right?
No, I don't remember. I think there was 2 keys, and this key thing has been like Kelly's big thing over this key, like that.
Well, that's why I'm asking, so you can explain.
Yeah, I believe we had 2 keys. I don't see. This is what I'm saying. They're trying to tell you there was only one key. I don't remember that. And if you ask me, this was 3 years ago.
Well, there were 2 keys.
Okay.
And I'm not saying what you said or didn't say. That's what I'm trying to find out. And then one key was in the room with Sheena. And then one key showed up at your house.
Yeah, that key was in Sheena's purse, and then that key there showed up on our kitchen counter. And that was after Joe told detectives that he did not have a key to the room.
See, but that's not true.
What part isn't true?
That you're trying to say that I didn't have a key, or there was 2 keys. I don't even remember.
No, you're the one that said you never had a key to the room. That's what you told the
I don't remember saying that. I don't remember saying that. That's where the untruth comes in here. But then again, I don't remember. This is 3 years ago. I don't remember if the 2 keys or 1 key.
You remember Detective Diaz calling you and asking you if you had the key to the room, if you did, to return it?
If he did and I had a key, if there were 2 keys and I had a key at the time, and I would have answered honestly.
Next, Jan Johnson appeared on the show. She had met Kelly through her volunteer work with the search and recovery team. She had reviewed the entire case and talked about what she found.
Well, to begin with, I looked at all the evidence that was provided to me the autopsy report, the crime scene photographs, and the police report.
All right, and out of this, you looked at close to 400 images from the Sheriff's Department and medical examiner, 70 color prints, the autopsy report, all of that, and you drew some conclusions from there.
Let's begin with the entrance to the crime scene. There is a do not disturb sign on the door. When you get to the area of the body, it's a white shower. Sheena has sand on her feet. There is no sand in the shower.
Okay, so there are no tracks of sand from the door to the shower and no sand in the shower.
That is correct.
So if she had sand on her feet and had walked in there to hang herself, some of it would have come off on the floor, is your point?
That is my opinion.
Okay. All right. What else did you see?
I also saw the position of her clothing. Number one, if she had hung herself, her pants would have been bunched up to the calf of her leg.
Why is that? Why would they have been bunched up to the calf of her leg?
The way she would have slid in position.
I see. Okay.
But instead, her feet are under her pants, consistent with her being either positioned or dragged to that position.
Okay. All right. What else?
I also looked at the dog leash wrapped around her neck, and I'm not sure if you hung yourself that dog leash would even support the weight of her body. Again, it's consistent with being staged.
Okay.
Also, I looked at the processing that was done by law enforcement, and it appeared to be very sparse. There was no processing of the shower floor for barefoot or footwear impression. Also, I don't know that a lot of the processing that could have been done was done in this case.
Did they check the walls for DNA or the leash for DNA or any of the surfaces that a perpetrator might have touched in trying to move the body or position it within the space?
Well, the things that I would have physically evidence-wise conducted in this case, I would have began at the very entrance where the do not disturb sign is, looking for fingerprints or touch DNA on the do not disturb sign. Also, I would have done touch DNA on the dog leash and also around her neck. You could do swabs around her neck, her clothing, the shower head, the walls surrounding her body, but I don't see that any of this was done.
Next comes what Kelly and Dave had waited years to hear. Actual polygraph results from Genoese. This was done by Jack Chamarco. For those of you unfamiliar with his work, he is one of the most experienced polygraphists in the world. I have Ira talk about his work.
And Jack was the polygraph examiner from the Federal Bureau of Investigation that was the go-to guy for years. He gave the polygraph test on such cases as the Oklahoma City bomber and the Unabombers. In all of these cases, he was the expert.
Before this point, Genoese had been smug and very friendly with Dr. Phil and the producers of the show. But this was Genoese after the results were read.
How many questions were asked, Jack?
Two relevant questions.
Two relevant questions, okay. The first question asked, did you kill Sheena Morris? Your answer was?
No.
All right. The second question, were you involved in causing the death of Sheena Morris?
No.
And your answer was no.
No.
And the polygraph result on both questions is that answer was deceptive. That you were not telling the truth when you said that.
I don't know what to tell you, but...
So, what do you have to say?
Well, I don't know if this is good for TV or what, but the point of the matter is, Doctor, I know I went home that night, and people saw me home that night, and I was there all night. Now, I'm I'm nervous and such. You know, I would never do anything like what you guys are trying to say.
Now, wait a minute. Don't say what I'm trying
Right.
to say. Now, Joe, that's not fair.
I understand.
That's not fair. Don't give me that crap. I've been very fair with you, and don't give me that, oh, that's good for television. Because I asked you, I brought you the top professional in the country. You agreed to take the test. I asked you before in this envelope, was the test fair? Were you comfortable with it? Were there any problems whatsoever? Were you comfortable with him? Did everything go well? Was the protocol right? All of that. And the result isn't what you want. You say, oh, well, you're just doing this for television. I resent that. That is not what is going on here. I have been straight and fair with you, and you know that.
All right. Well, I'd like to take it again then, because
Well, then-
obviously it's wrong.
Okay, well, and listen, I want to help you any way that I can.
Yeah,
but don't insult me when I have gone to great lengths to bring you the top professional here. You asked to do it. I want to help you, man. I do. And it is not, Jack, help me out here. Is this, was this a close call?
Wasn't a close call at all.
What does that mean?
It means he should have been polygraphed back in 2009.
Right.
He
And
should have been interviewed sooner, back in 2009.
Right.
As I sit here today, in my mind, Joe's a suspect in the murder.
Because this is a podcast, you can't see that Genovese shakes his head yes, but says no to the questions asked by Dr. Phil. Kelly and Dave talk about how they felt when they heard the results and that Genovese had failed.
Even leading up to, before finding out about the results of the polygraph, Dave and I were on a flight and we were discussing on, you know, if he fails this polygraph, then let's be careful of our reactions, because I was worried that, I knew myself that I'm anticipating if he fails this polygraph, what my reaction is going to be, and that's going to be to want to get up and go over and kill him myself. But I was concerned about just trying to remain under control so that we didn't look like we were on a Jerry Springer show, and try to maintain that. And I know personally that by holding in how I really felt was just making me sick, literally sick to my stomach. I was holding my stomach and bowing over, and I can't even explain the feeling, how you suddenly learn that this guy who you suspected had everything to do with Sheena's death just failed the polygraph. And Dave, you can explain how it was for you.
I remember, obviously they separated us from Genovese before they read the results. They put us in the audience, and Kelly and I were just sitting there waiting for him to open that envelope. And after he did, of course, Joe looked like he was completely disgusted and with the results, of course. But I remember Kelly just telling him, I can't even look at you right now. I can't even look at you right now. And Genovese, of course, his response is, that he didn't do this. I don't know what to say. And, of course, Jack Tremarco sitting in the audience, his response is, you can start by saying you're sorry, because it was kind of apparent to him that, Genovese had lied to him, which Jack Tremarco did state that Joe Genovese did lie to him an awful lot in that room that morning taking that polygraph test. But we were both furious, but we held it in and kept our composure. And if you'll notice on the Dr. Phil show, if you watch the clip, that even Dr. Phil himself was not sitting in the chair next to Genovese anymore when he read the results. He was standing behind the chair, so he was more or less keeping a distance between Genovese and himself by standing behind a chair when he read the results to Genovese.
This is the exchange between Genoese and Sheena's family after the polygraph results were read.
First of all, they said I was interviewed 22 days later, and that's not the truth. David went down.
So it was 5 days later.
It was approximately 5 days later, and David went with me on the interview.
4 or 5.
See, there's just
We weren't
constant.
interviewed.
Okay. Kelly, what do you want to say?
They were not interviewed that 5 days later. The police released my daughter's jewelry to Joe, and they simply handed Sheena's suitcase to the father. They did not question Joe at that point, and they never even sat Sheena's father down and asked, when was the last time you spoke with her, and how did she sound when you spoke with her? None of that. They handed David his dead daughter's suitcase and my dead daughter's jewelry back to Joe. There was no questioning done at that point.
Tell me what's in your mind and heart right now, having heard these results.
I really was not hoping that Joe was the murderer of my daughter. If it turned out that he passed, then I knew there was another avenue that I had to look further into. I can't even look that way right now.
Kelly, I didn't murder Sheena, okay? And we really just need to take another polygraph, because I'm telling you right now, I went home and I was there all night. So we need to do another polygraph.
I won't polygraph you again.
Okay, well then somebody else will have to, because I'm telling you, you know, I was nervous about this, and I'm nervous. I've never taken one of these things before.
No one ever has, Joe, and everyone's nervous.
Okay.
But you're either lying or you're telling the truth.
Suddenly, they noticed that the producers, who had been so friendly with Genoese before, changed their demeanor. Sheena's parents thought that they had been too friendly with Genoese, but that all changed after the results were heard.
Yeah, I remember things changed very suddenly after those results were done. All of a sudden, a lot of the crew, the film crew, the producers, started to just kind of start scurrying around, basically getting their plan of security in order. And that was, I remember Dave and we weren't even allowed to leave our dressing rooms until they had Genoese in a car and out of the city. And they even tried changing our flights. They didn't want us in the same airport at the same time. They were trying to keep as much distance, but the producers, they didn't even know what the polygraph results were until Dr. Phil read them. And I think they were all very shocked.
I then talked to Kelly and Dave about how they felt when the results were read. They had to feel some kind of vindication, but it was more a feeling of relief that they finally had their proof.
Well, there was a lot of relief. It's unfortunate to say that it just felt like a celebration, like, okay, finally, after all these years, finally, now they can start listening. Now we can get somewhere.
Kelly and Dave returned to their respective homes, finally feeling like the Bradenton Beach Police and the state of Florida can no longer ignore their pleas for a thorough investigation. Yet this was how Bradenton Beach Police Chief Speciale responded to Genoese's failed polygraph.
And I remember calling Chief Speciale saying, Did you see that? Did you see that he failed the polygraph? And Speciale said, I don't watch that stuff. I'm like, this is an investigation. He just failed the polygraph. And he said he wasn't going to watch it.
Sheena's family cannot believe it. After everything Genoese had lied about, he finally got caught, and the police department responsible for allowing this man to walk the streets couldn't give a damn. Kelly was beside herself with the Bradenton Beach Police Department's reaction. Sheena's family was very hopeful, though, that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement was finally going to investigate this case. They were the overseers of the whole Florida law enforcement system. Surely they had the experience and would look at this case with an open mind. That is where I'm going to leave off for this week. Over the next 2 episodes, I will be discussing the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's case and their response to everything the family had brought up during their investigation. We would also like to give a special thank you to Lee Williams, for the article he recently wrote about this podcast in the Herald Tribune. We hope that this is just the start in getting justice for Sheena. A special thanks to Mike Mack, who did all the music for this podcast. If you'd like to hear more samples of Mike Mack's work, you can go to his website, www.mike-mack.com, or you can follow him on Twitter @MikeMack. Thank you to our sponsors, Blueberry and TotalFrontPage.com. Please support them as they have supported this podcast from the very beginning. If you're interested in learning more about this case, you will soon find all the evidence and documentation used in this podcast at archangelsofjustice.org/podcast. For updates about future episodes and cases, follow us on Twitter @ArchangelPod and on Facebook under Archangels of Justice. If you would like to send us an email, you can reach us at podcast@archangelsofjustice.org. If you are listening on iTunes or SoundCloud, we would appreciate it if you left us a positive review. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you here next week for episode 5 of the Sheena Morris case.